Hi everybody, welcome to our lesson this afternoon. I'm looking forward to spending some time with you. We're going to be covering the lymphatic system first of all, and then in the second part of the show we're going to be looking at plant hormones. So, grade 10s and 11s, what do you remember about the lymphatic system? It's important to remember that although we think that blood makes up all the liquid in our body, in fact blood only makes up about 1/3 of the liquid in our body. Most of the liquid that we have is tissue fluid and lymph. So where does this tissue fluid and the lymph therefore come from? Well, the tissue fluid is something that has actually leaked out of capillaries in capillary beds. So wherever your arteries have taken the blood to and that has dispersed into a capillary bed, tissue fluid actually is blood plasma that leaks out of the capillaries in these areas which we call capillary beds. This plasma is what takes the cells the nutrition in the form of glucose, amino acids, and it brings oxygen to the cells as well. Of course, the carbon dioxide and the nitrogenous wastes that the cells produce themselves is collected then into the tissue fluid from the cells. This picture very nice and neatly summarizes what we've been talking about. We know that arteries, or small arteries called arterioles, bring the blood to a system of capillaries. Here we can see the artery splits up into a whole lot of capillaries, which we call a capillary bed. Now, these are the body cells lying in amongst the capillaries that require the nutrition and the oxygen that is being brought by this blood. And so what happens is, if you look at these little black arrows, the tissue fluid or the plasma leaks from the capillary into the spaces in between these body cells. And as soon as the plasma moves from the blood vessel into these spaces to bathe the cells, we call it tissue fluid. Now, most of the tissue fluid doesn't actually get reabsorbed back into the veins. Some does. We certainly see some of the tissue fluid moving from the spaces in between the cells back into the vein, and that's great. But the amount of tissue fluid that leaked out is far less than the amount that moves back into the vein. So where does the tissue fluid go? Well, it drains into these vessels called lymph vessels, which you can see are blind-ending vessels that are situated in the cells, in amongst the cells, embedded in the cells, and the tissue fluid drains into these lymph vessels, and the lymph vessels then collect all that tissue fluid, and eventually we're going to see they return it to the blood system. So let's just summarize then. The plasma leaked out of the capillaries. It bathed the cells, taking them nutrition and oxygen. Into the tissue fluid, the cells dumped their wastes and carbon dioxide, and some of that tissue fluid diffused back into the blood vessels, but the rest, very importantly, was drained into these lymph vessels. And the pathway that the lymph then takes is it moves from all of these capillary beds, tiny little lymph vessels, making larger lymph vessels, larger ones and larger ones, as they all join together, and they slowly move the tissue fluid out of the capillary beds back towards the central core parts of your body. Now, the tissue fluid on its way back to the core parts of your body has the perfect opportunity in these lymph vessels to be filtered. And the filtration that takes place is to remove any germs, which we know by now can be possibly bacteria, any viruses, any substances which are going to harm the body can have this perfect opportunity to be filtered out of the tissue fluid. And before the lymph rejoins the blood system, which it does up here at your subclavian veins, we find that this fluid is going to be filtered through the lymph nodes. But more about that after the break.